Ready? Aha. Everyone here? Good. Do we need everyone to put headsets on? Yeah?
I guess it depends how loud we're going to be, really, doesn't it?
Is that better? Can you hear? Good.
Amazing.
So thanks for coming to this discussion, mainly focusing on crafting inclusion and inclusive UX to ensure that we can get both together. So I'm Ryan Kennedy. I'm the Adjustments and Accessibility Lead at Scope. So we're a pan-disability charity here in the UK.
And I'm Heather. I'm Digital Accessibility Specialist at Scope. And yeah.
Perfect. So is accessibility quite new to everyone? No? Know a little bit about it? Okay. So often accessibility and user experience are split. They're usually thought of differently. One team may be managing one may be the other. But actually, they should both sit together. You can't do UX without accessibility, and you can't do user accessibility without UX. They should always sit together, and actually they'll benefit each other as the process goes on. So when we talk about how they benefit and what actually we're talking about with the UX is to be able to have great user experience, you have to be able to understand what disabled people's needs are, but secondly, you need the disabled people to tell you what they want. You can't do it if you're not disabled. And it's also hard to understand what they may need when you don't have that lived experience or the understanding of what they want. So we hear a lot about accessibility, and the big things in big organizations is it's too time consuming, it's too hard to do it, it's going to take too much time, but also it's going to cost a lot of money. Well, actually, we don't agree with any of that. It will cost you a lot, and it will take a lot of time if you forget about it and do it last. If you do it first, you'll have a bigger and better product than you've ever had before, but usually it's always left till the last decision. And then when it's then, it's very hard, because you would costly have to go back through all of your product, rip all of that back to pieces to be able to get to the core idea to then be able to remake that platform or product you're selling. Do you want to go?
So why should accessibility be at the forefront of your minds? Why are you looking confused then?
No.
Oh, okay, sorry. And how can you get buy-in from your higher-ups to actually pay for accessibility? So generally, there are kind of 3 reasons that people implement accessibility. 1, because their main focus is on accessibility, for example, a disability charity or a product that's specifically designed for disabled people. 2, they might be bound by legal obligation. So obviously there's the Equality Act in the UK, and also the public sector bodies accessibility regulations, which is such a mouthful. And also there's the new EU legislation that comes in 2025 that may affect quite a few of you here. And then the 3rd reason, which is the one that we're going to talk about today, is the financial reason. Disabled people have spending power, and disabled people buy things too.
So I just want to go over a quote from Elise Roy from their TED Talk about accessibility and inclusive design. So when we design for disability first, we often stumble upon the solutions that are not only inclusive, but are often better than when you've designed for the norm. So actually, by using accessibility, you'll end up with a better product, more innovation, than what you would have ever had if you didn't consider accessibility. And I think just briefly touching on the EU legislation, are any of you aware of that for next year? No? All of you sell or have products or platforms? Okay, so it's an EU legislation that's been in the pipeline for years. I won't go into detail because it's not a piece of legislation that we're taking on in the UK, but it will affect any organization that if your product or service touches any of the EU market, you'll have to apply by that legislation. That's a lot more rigorous than here in the UK. So that will be at banks, ATM machines, till systems, any platforms that you have online. If there's any accessibility barriers, then there's huge profit fines from the EU Commission that will be put upon employers. So we're actually, a lot of our work comes in, and it's we've got till June next year. We need to do something now because as soon as that date comes in, the fines are going to start happening. So it just goes to show that accessibility is usually left till the last, and it's only until there's money involved that the enforcement's come in. Organisations will then think, okay, we need to do something quick and fast, otherwise we're going to have to pay out a lot of money to be able to fix it.
So in the UK, 1 in 4 of us are disabled. That's roughly 16 million people. And they have spending power. So the purple pound is a figure that represents the collective spending power of disabled consumers and their households. It highlights the economic power that disabled people and their families have. We know that people recommend places to shop, leave reviews, and avoid places after bad experiences. If someone can't access your site or struggles to pay, they will tell their friends and family, and this influence is what defines the purple pound. It highlights that economic influence that disabled people, their households, their friends, and their families have.
And then just before Heather changes the slide, anyone know how big and how much the purple pound's worth here in the UK? No? Okay, so just before that. So in the UK, the purple pound is a collective of any household in the UK or across the world that has at least one disabled person in that household. So the collective spending power just here in the UK is £274 billion that disabled households in the UK have as a spending power. And globally, that's £16 trillion that's not unlocked, and it's a market that no one operates in because of inaccessible products and services. So if inclusive design and pure user experience is created, and not user experience that doesn't consider inclusive design, by merging the two, you then are able to operate in a market globally of 16 trillion. So it's not just a small collective spending power, it is a huge economic market that anyone can tap into if accessibility is at the core of their product.
So how do you bring accessibility into your user experience? So one place to start is WCAG, or the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, but everyone uses the abbreviation because that is a mouthful. Firstly, what is accessibility though? So accessibility means that disabled users can use and access your content. So from landing on the homepage all the way through to the purchase journey, and that there aren't any barriers to stop them from accessing things. And again, WCAG are the internationally recognised set of standards to help improve user experience. This is also for your older customers and those who are less technologically illiterate. I will say though, accessibility, and I hate the phrase, but accessibility is a journey. It's not something that you're gonna crack overnight. It takes a long time, and I think just making a start is always the best place to start.
So under WCAG, there's 86 different pieces of criteria. So if you're doing a website audit, for example, every single page has to go through 86 different tests. And then we would test that across all of the web pages to then be able to understand if the whole platform was conformative to that guideline. So under that we have the PAW system. So we have perceivable, which is a user can access the content using their senses, whether that's sound, visually, or via touch. They're able to use whatever technology they want, and they're still able to get the same experience as to any other user on that platform. We then have operable. Is every control of that platform working? So every button, every link, every image, can they do every single thing that all of us can do, whether that's just on a keyboard or just on a mouse, or whether that's them dictating via voice to tell the system what they want to do. And then we have understandable. Understandable is ensuring that the content is understood by anyone. So is your reading age of all of your written content, is it written at a postgraduate level, which actually means the majority of users would never be able to understand what you're talking about, or is the reading age that we would say between 7 and 8 for a Hemingway score, which is nowhere near postgraduate, but all of us should be able to, as a majority, be able to understand what you're saying. And also use an internal jargon. A lot of organizations will talk about things that internally you know what it is, but externally no one's got a clue what you're talking about. And then robust. Every piece of assistive technology that's out there and used by disabled people, can all of those pieces of technology work and interact with every aspect of your product and platform? If they can't, that may just be one person that's excluded, but it could also be an internal person that works for you that's also excluded from selling your own product.
So, for you guys, I'm guessing that one of the key touch points that you want to make accessible is your purchase journey. And they do come with a lot of barriers for disabled customers, from things like countdown timers, authentication, and error messages. So your purchase journey should be as simple and intuitive to use as possible. When asking users to input data, be clear exactly how you want them to do it and what to enter. Inputs like name are not always clear to a user. Do you want their first name? Do you want their surname? Explain what you want in the inputs. Always tell a user as well what format you want their information in. Do they need to add spaces when putting their card number? Do they need to enter their date of birth with dashes or slashes? Do they need to enter it the American way and they're like, there are not 25 months in a year? Things like this. And then the error messages. Error messages should always be super clear. No one likes it when you fill in a form and it just goes, something's wrong. And that it says, this is what's wrong. It doesn't have to say why, just pinpoint where the problem is rather than just, it ain't working. And it's not just your purchase journey. So users need to be able to use your whole site. One of the main issues that we always see is around color and color contrast. So in WCAG, there are quite a few criteria that talk about color. Good color contrast benefits all users. It benefits visually impaired users, colorblind users, but also someone using their phone in bright sunlight. So in the UK, 1 in 12 men, which is 8%, and 1 in 200 women are colorblind, including me. Having poor color contrast can mean that some users can't see your content, miss out on content, or do not receive the same information. Good color contrast is best for usability. So on the screen, there are 2 sentences, and I realized because it's so big, you may be able to see it. The top one says, I bet you can't read this, and that has really, really low color contrast. I'm colorblind, I can't read it. And the one below, which has really, really good color contrast, that is really clear. And it's these little things that just make user experience so much better, and make sure your users don't miss something.
So keyboard access. How many of you would be able to carry on your day-to-day work if your keyboard broke? Anyone? No? If your mouse broke, could you carry on doing all of the work that you've been doing, but with no mouse? You would? Okay. So that's what this is all about. If you couldn't do your day job now with either no keyboard or no mouse, then it's the understanding of how disabled people would work when actually they may never use a mouse or they may never use a keyboard. And that's the first test to ask. If you can't use all of your work platform, then you know that there's an issue with that platform. Because if it was a disabled person, they wouldn't even get a chance to get into it. So one here you'll see is that this is on a bigger screen. It's about us tracking your tab index. So when you're on a keyboard users will use the tab key. So one thing I always say is when you go back, or when you've got chance, go on your website and keep hitting your tab key. And then after about 10 tabs, hit enter or the space bar and see what happens. You'll either drop to the bottom of the page, or it will reload you to another page. And what that's doing is going through the interactive elements of your page. And a screen reader user that's just using keyboard and having everything spoken to them through their headset, when they're hitting enter, that's telling them that they're going to another page or another feature. That may be pausing or stopping audio, or pausing and stopping a video. But as you'll see here, this website, they have a tab in the middle, but they don't have a tab on sign up. So no disabled user using a keyboard would ever be able to know that there's a sign up button on this website. And if they're blind, they'll never know that it's there either. So that's what we talk about by interactive elements and making sure that they're coded. But then we also look at keyboard focus. Now often, organizations don't like random keyboard focus because the color doesn't match the brand. And that's the first thing, this color really doesn't suit what we're going for. This is our nice color palette, that's completely off the charts. Well, actually, keyboard focus sits around the element when you're clicking the tab key. So none of us would ever see that color, only if we were visually impaired and using a keyboard for control. Otherwise, you will never know it exists. And I can say that for blind people, they don't care what color that is. As long as the contrast is clear, they're not marking it against your brand colors and your normal colors. For example, Scope's brand is purple, predominantly, but our keyboard focus is a luminous green, and we have no green in our brand, but it's the best and the most highest contrast for any color against all of our brand colors. So that's why we have the green. But you will never know what your organization has until you start hitting that tab key. But usually there is no focus on there. Then captions. Do any of you produce videos for your websites or your platforms? Are all of them captioned? All of them? Everyone? No? It's fine. Also transcripts. Does anyone provide transcripts to all their videos? No? Some? Okay. So closed captions. For visually impaired colleagues that aren't able to visually see what's going on that video, a transcript is great. Firstly, if they're using a screen reader, they're able to read back. How many of you would attend or watch a 10-minute video and then think, actually, I've got to the end, but I really can't remember what that really important thing was that they said right at the beginning. Now I'm at the end, I've gone home, I've got no clue what that was. We all do that day to day. Well, actually, having a transcript is a full written version of everything that's been spoken. So for pre-recorded videos, that's the go-to standard to be able to produce that transcript. And then also with captions, making sure that the captions are there for any pre-recorded video. Using YouTube or other platforms like that, you don't pay a penny. It automatically will do the captions for you. But it just gives that flexibility so that whoever's watching that video, they're able to interact, especially if it's a user guide. If you're passing a platform over and saying, this is what you need to do to sign up, they're never going to sign up if they can't watch the video that you're telling them they've got to do their instructions with.
So one of the other things that we think is really important is really good link text. So link text tells the user exactly where that link's going to take them, and then they will follow it with confidence. Buttons like click here, read more, they aren't informative to users. And for screen reader users, these types of links are almost pointless because they will just have no idea where it's going to take them. Descriptive link text is useful for those with lower digital literacy or someone who's nervous about using technology because it's that consistency of telling them this is where it's going to take you. And I'm sure everyone has done fraud awareness training at some point in their life, and you were always told if you get sent an email with a big long URL on it, do not click it. If you're sending these kind of things out to your customers, they're going to have the same thought process, especially even with just like read more links, like read more about what, tell them where they're going to go. And then your users can confidently move on.
So with accessibility, we've focused quite a lot on products, we've focused quite a lot on platforms because that's what you're all going to be using within the e-commerce world. But it's about taking that step back and then turning it back on yourself. So for example, we all communicate via email. We all use internal systems for our colleagues. We may all use social media blogs or anything like that, but then actually you've got a payroll system, you've got a finance system, you've got a system that colleagues have to log on to be able to book holiday. If you had a disabled employee join your organization, it's also having to ensure that they can access everything you access day to day, because under the Equality Act you're legally obliged to make sure that everything your disabled colleagues interact with is accessible and that they aren't put at a disadvantage against everyone that's non-disabled. Yep.
And then lastly, we just want to talk about social media accessibility. We see a lot of inaccessible social media posts, so we've kind of done a really quick guide for it. So alt text on images. Alt text allow visually impaired users who are using screen readers and other sorts of assistive technology to know what the image is. Without alt text, anyone using certain types of assistive technology will either be read absolute nonsense or just meaningless noise. Or my favorite one is click to get missing image description, and then an AI will try and write it for you, and they are always really wrong. I saw one once where it said a Great Dane was a horse, sorry. Again, captions on your videos, really important. Avoid abbreviations and acronyms. So quite a lot of your social media posts, especially if you're using Twitter, shrink the amount of words you can use. And you will be tempted to use abbreviations and acronyms. They're not always the best, because for different people, they have different meanings. So one example I always like to use is in Scope, we have two abbreviations, which is DSL. One is Designated Safeguarding Lead, and the other one is Disability Support Leave. And they are two very different things, but they have the same abbreviation, and it does get confusing. Avoid sparsely used emojis, because they are really annoying if you use like 8 smiley faces in a row to a screen reader user, because each time you put the smiley face in that row, it's going to read smiley face emoji. And then avoid flashing GIFs, because these can trigger users with photosensitive epilepsy. There are kind of like timing thresholds, but to be honest, I just avoid using them. And lastly, camel case your hashtags, which all it means is that you capitalize the first letter of each word for screen reader users. Otherwise, the screen reader will try and read it all as one word. I'm not going to try and read out this is camel casing as one word, but honestly, it's quite funny. But to someone who's using a screen reader and wants to know what that hashtag is, it's completely meaningless.
And then accessibility. We always say it's everyone's responsibility. There's no way we're going to solve accessibility if not every single person has to take that personal responsibility for what you put out there. So we always say there should never be one set person or one set team that manages accessibility. We have, in Scope, one team, but that doesn't mean that we do all the work. We will train every person in Scope how to do it, but then if someone comes to us for help, we're not going to fix their work for them. Whether that means a campaign's going out late, or that means that we're not transferring to a new system, or our exec directors aren't going to get the board paper on time. That's not what we're there for. We're therefore to push back and say, actually, this is what you need to go and do, go and fix it, then send it. And if that means anything's delayed, that's our ethos. It's delayed. There is nothing going out on TV, on adverts, in print, nothing. If it's not accessible, it doesn't happen. And it's also ensuring that there's 1.4 million people in the UK, 1.1 in 4 disabled people in the UK. So that's 16 million people. And every day, those 16 million people are saying, I'm not going to shop at this brand, and I will tell every other disabled person I know not to shop at this one brand because they don't care about accessibility. So it's enough that we say, for once and for all, we have to bring UX and accessibility together to make one perfect solution for all of us. And it shouldn't be that there is separate systems for disabled people and non-disabled people. So, is there any questions? No? No? Happy? Good?
Amazing.
Okay, that's it. Thank you.